let's start with a fact you learned in geography class and you never questioned again. Mount Everest is not actually the highest mountain in the world. It is the highest mountain above sea level, which sounds like the same thing until you realize sea level is just a human-chosen reference point. Everest rises 8,849 meters above sea level, and that is where its reputation comes from. But that measurement quietly ignores where a mountain actually begins. A mountain's real height is measured from its base to its peak, not from an imaginary horizontal line drawn across the planet. That is where Mauna Kea enters the picture. This massive volcano in Hawaii looks unassuming from the shore, but most of it is hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean. When measured from its true base on the ocean floor all the way to the summit, Mauna Kea rises over 10,210 meters. That makes it taller than Everest by more than a kilometer. Everest dominates the skyline. Mauna Kea dominates the planet's vertical scale. The difference is visibility, not size. The next lie from your geography teacher sounds like a clever Viking prank. Greenland is icy, Iceland is green, and the names were supposedly swapped to trick settlers. It is a great story, but it's not true. Iceland got its name because of what early Norse explorers saw. When they first approached the island from the North Atlantic, they encountered ice-clogged fjords, drifting sea ice, and frozen coastlines. That was the dominant feature, which mattered most to sailors. The green valleys existed, but they were inland and invisible from the approach. The name Iceland was descriptive, not deceptive. Greenland's name does come from marketing, but not in the way people imagine. According to Viking sagas, Eric the Red named it Greenland after being exiled and settling the southwestern coast. During the warm medieval period, that region genuinely had grasslands suitable for farming and livestock. Calling it Greenland was not a lie. It was a highlight reel. He was selling the best part of a harsh land, not hiding the rest. And that brings us to a lie that looks obvious, which is why it fools so many people. And when you think of deserts, you picture heat, sand, and endless dunes. That instinct points straight to the Sahara. But by scientific definition, the Sahara is not the largest desert on Earth. Antarctica is. Now, before you get confused, a desert is not defined by heat or temperature, but by how little rainfall it receives. Judging by this, Antarctica is a desert, even though we often perceive it as a frozen wasteland covered in snow. It has seen less than 0.4 inches of rain in the past 30 years. The Sahara Desert, on the other hand, receives 3 inches of rainfall every year. Antarctica's air is so cold and dry that it holds almost no moisture. When snow does fall, it can remain untouched for centuries. This extreme dryness is why plant life is almost non-existent, with mosses and lichen being the only exceptions along the coast. Size is where this really sinks in. Antarctica covers 14.2 million square kilometers compared to the Sahara's 9.2 million square kilometers, making it the largest desert on Earth. The world's largest desert is not hot, sandy, or golden. It is silent, white, and shaped by the absence of water. Once you understand this, the word desert will never mean the same thing again. And if Antarctica is the largest desert, the second largest should be the Sahara. That feels logical, but it's wrong. The Arctic is the second largest desert on Earth. Just like Antarctica, it qualifies due to the little rainfall it receives. The Arctic Desert stretches across northern Canada, Greenland, Russia, and Alaska, covering 13.9 million square kilometers. That is 4.7 million square kilometers more than the Sahara. The Sahara remains the largest hot desert on Earth, and it earns that distinction. But overall size tells a different story. The next lie we're busting sounds almost sacred, which is why it sticks so hard. The Amazon rainforest is called the lungs of the Earth, credited with producing most of the oxygen you are breathing right now. It feels intuitive, dramatic, and comforting. It is misleading. The Amazon does produce an enormous amount of oxygen through photosynthesis, but here is the part they usually leave out. Almost all of that oxygen is used up inside the forest itself. Plants respire. Animals breathe. Fungi and microbes consume oxygen as they break down dead matter. The forest is in a constant loop of production and consumption. When scientists look at the net result, the Amazon's oxygen contribution is close to zero. Not because it's failing, but because it's balanced. The real oxygen-heavy lifting happens elsewhere. Most of the planet's oxygen comes from the oceans. Tiny phytoplankton near the surface produce oxygen across vast areas, day after day, without being noticed. The Amazon is still one of the most important ecosystems on Earth. It regulates climate, stores carbon, and supports staggering biodiversity. But its value is not just about filling the sky with air. Up next is a lie that slips through classrooms because it sounds neat. Russia and Turkey are taught as the only countries that span 2 continents. They are famous examples, but they are not alone. Egypt also spans 2 continents. Most of the country sits in North Africa, but the Sinai Peninsula lies in Asia. It lies to the east of the Suez Canal and rests on the Asian tectonic plate. That makes Egypt both African and Asian by geographic definition. The canal itself often confuses people because it feels like a natural divider. Many treat it as a continental boundary. In reality, reality, it is entirely man-made. Canals, borders, or politics do not define continents. Russia and Turkey are still the most famous examples because their populations and cities span across continents. Istanbul, in particular, makes the divide impossible to ignore. Egypt's case is quieter, but just as real. Alright, let's move to a claim that changes how you see every world map you have ever looked at. On most maps, Greenland appears almost the same size as Africa. That visual comparison feels so normal that few people ever question it. The illusion comes from the Mercator projection. It was designed centuries ago to help sailors navigate by preserving direction, not to show the actual size. As you move away from the equator and closer to the poles, land masses are stretched more and more. Greenland sits near the poles, so it is enlarged. Africa sits near the equator, so it gets compressed. In reality, Africa is enormous. You could fit Greenland into Africa more than 14 times. Africa contains countries that appear smaller than European nations on maps, yet are several times larger in real life. The Earth is not lying to you. The map is simplifying reality for convenience. Once you understand that, you stop trusting flat maps at face value. The next fact feels almost silly, yet refuses to die. Kansas City sounds like it should be in Kansas, but most of it is not. Kansas City is primarily located in Missouri. Only a small portion crosses into Kansas, and that is a separate city with its own government. Many are confused because Kansas City was founded before Kansas became a state. The name originally referred to the Kansas River and the Kansa Native American tribe, not the state. By the time Kansas entered the Union, the city's identity was already rooted on the Missouri side. Today, Kansas City, Missouri is the larger and more prominent half, home to downtown major sports teams and cultural landmarks. Kansas City, Kansas exists, but it is a separate city with its own government. Let's move on to a lie that feels intuitive, which is why it sticks. Many believe the equator should be the hottest part of the Earth, more direct sunlight, more heat, end of story. But surface temperature does not work that way. Equatorial regions do get intense sunlight, but they also get something else almost constantly: clouds, rain, and storms. Thick cloud cover reflects sunlight. In addition, heavy rainfall cools the surface. To top it all, moist air absorbs heat and redistributes it through weather systems. The result is humidity, not record heat. The hottest places on Earth sit further north and south, in subtropical desert belts. The Sahara, the Arabian Desert, and Death Valley receive relentless sunlight with almost no cloud cover. Dry air allows heat to accumulate during the day and linger with little moderation. This is why equatorial rainforests feel humid but rarely reach record-breaking highs. So heat doesn't result from proximity to the sun. It depends on the atmosphere, moisture, and circulation patterns quietly shaping where the planet truly burns. This misconception is because maps and school lessons simplify climate into neat horizontal bands, which mislead generations worldwide. The next claim challenges something so basic that it feels uncomfortable. You were taught in school that Europe is a continent, but geologically, it does not qualify as one. Unlike Africa or Australia, Europe is not separated by oceans or a clear tectonic boundary. It is the western extension of the Eurasian landmass. From a geological standpoint, there is no sharp break between Europe and Asia. The borders we use are cultural, not physical. Lines like the Ural Mountains, the Caucasus, and the Bosphorus made sense historically, and that's why they were chosen. They reflected empires, languages, and identities, not shifts in the Earth's crust. From space, the land flows continuously from Portugal all the way to China. What we call Europe is essentially a large peninsula, made of smaller peninsulas, shaped by history rather than geology. However, this does not make Europe less real. It shows how human history shapes geography. Continents are not just physical facts. They are stories societies agree to tell, reinforced by education, politics, and centuries of shared memory. That agreement matters because maps influence power, identity, and how people understand their place in the world across generations and civilizations over time. Now, this one is often simplified until it becomes misleading. Kashmir belongs entirely to India. The reality is far more complicated. The region has been disputed since the partition of British India in 1947, when borders were drawn quickly along religious lines. That moment created unresolved claims that still define the region today. India controls roughly 2/3 of the territory, including Jammu, the Kashmir Valley, and Ladakh. Pakistan controls the western area, known as Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. China controls Aksai Chin in the east, which it has governed since the 1960s after a brief war with India. Each side has its own justification. India points to a legal accession signed by the former ruler. Pakistan argues that the Muslim-majority population was denied a choice. China's claim is tied to borders inherited from earlier empires and strategic access routes. The result is one of the most militarized regions on Earth. Kashmir is not a single-owned place. It is a fragmented landscape shaped by history, power, and unresolved decisions that continue to destabilize South Asia. The last but not least claim exists because of habit and politics. We often group Afghanistan with the Middle East, but geographically and culturally, it does not belong there. Afghanistan sits at the crossroads of South and Central Asia. Its history is deeply tied to regions that are now Pakistan, India, and Iran. Trade routes, empires, and migrations connected it eastward long before modern borders existed. Cultural clues are everywhere. Pashto and Dari are more related to South and Central Asian language families, not Arabic. Afghan food and music and social traditions align more closely with neighboring Asian cultures than with Middle Eastern ones. The confusion comes from conflict, politics, and the media. Decades of war, religious preservation, and Western narratives blurred distinctions and folded Afghanistan into a vague regional category. However, tectonic plates, trade routes, and ancient empires placed Afghanistan within Asian networks long before modern borders existed. Afghanistan is not an outlier in the Middle East. It is a bridge between regions shaped by mountains, movement, and centuries of exchange. These lies reveal how easily maps, names, and assumptions can mislead us. The world is not wrong. Our shortcuts are. Distorted projections, inherited borders, and misunderstood climates show how perspective shapes belief. Geography rewards curiosity, not memorization. When you look closer, familiar places become surprising, and simple facts become layered stories. Which of these surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy learning about the hidden logic behind the world we think we know, subscribing goes a long way in showing that. Stay curious, question maps, and keep watching for truths nearby.